So it's interesting, you know, when we had Jean-Pierre and Andrea, it's almost a sense of we dismiss the importance of history in Canada, and you hear that as well in the US, and then it goes all the way to the other end in Poland, where the importance is incredible because of the fear of history. And so I'm really seeing this tension between government institutions recognizing the relevance of history, but we don't really want them to go too crazy and create one narrative and then start weaponizing history. So what do you folks think we should do as teachers, historians, and everyday people to underline the importance of history, but also watch out for abuses of control of this historical narrative? Jean-Pierre, would you like to start?
Sure. It's a very big question, and it's a very challenging one, because on one side we look at the Canadian government, which has largely pushed itself away. The Canada 150 was not exactly the most historically celebratory, for lack of, like, celebrating history, not celebrating Canadians. But it wasn't all that much inclusion, and it's almost like trying to challenge that narrative is not wanting to recognize our own national narrative. I work in the field of Indigenous history and the policies of the government of Canada towards Indigenous peoples. It is not a nice story. There's nothing to celebrate there, and it has to be commemorated and recognized as part of our identity. But at the same time, many people are resistant to it because they don't want to feel bad about their history. So this is part of the challenge that we have. And I would argue that as educators, as an educator myself, we need to continue pushing people to question what that narrative is being said, just as it is in Poland, just as it is here. Having the Polish people challenge that, just as we should have Canadians challenging our own national narrative, has to be something that we have to encourage people to do. And the only way to really do it is through good historical thinking, historical approaches.
Okay. I think that there are two answers to that question. The first one is that I see historians as truth speakers and truth tellers, and that it is our responsibility to hold people who are in positions of power accountable for how they use history. But I think that history should always make us all uncomfortable, because history is neither good nor bad. It is complicated. And if we're not feeling uncomfortable, then we're doing something wrong.
Okay, well, I have been teaching history for 25 years, 24 years in Ottawa, and veering away from my private little research work. In terms of teaching, what I think is absolutely vital, and here I am preaching to the converted, so it's easy. Something has to be done in order to restore the presence of history in secondary schools. I'm teaching now a first-year course, and I am dramatically aware of this absence. There is actually, I was informed that you can graduate from a secondary school without having taken, I hope I'm wrong, but that's what I was led to believe, that if you try it really hard, you can graduate without taking one even course in history in Ontario. And on the other note, in terms of government meddling, I think the government should be held at arm's length away from the content of textbooks. This is something that I learned to my chagrin, and it has to be maintained. Unfortunately, I mean, we are in this blessed situation that we are living in a democratic and tolerant society, which sometimes it comes to me with a stronger, perhaps, a very strong message once I come back to Canada, and I enjoy a moment from after having spent some time in Eastern Europe, because we should be aware of threats that are out there. Okay, we are having the tools at our disposal here. We should use them wisely and be aware that what we have is a bit of a fool's paradise. We shouldn't take it for granted. We should really use all the resources that we have here.
So one example comes to mind from the States. We don't really have any government agencies that officially dictate the history, but we have several, such as the National Park Service. So in 2015, we just came out of 4-year commemoration of our Civil War, 150th anniversary of our Civil War. And the Park Service made a point of having the national parks who deal with that history of the Civil War say that the reason and the cause for the Civil War was slavery, which was a big step because in the past they'd never officially said the cause was slavery. So just after that ended, that commemoration, we started to have our interesting talks about Confederate memorials all around the country. And so now we're in the middle of that conversation, which is a wonderful time to talk about the relevance of history because it seems to be everywhere in the news in the States. And so I would just say it's a great opportunity to have these difficult conversations, and where the government fits into that, I'm not quite sure. I'll leave it at that.
Great. Well, I think we will all be able to continue these conversations over lunch. Look, we're at 11:59.